Hello, everyone. Welcome into Attacking Third. I'm Sandra, Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's segment, we're doing an Orlando Pride preview. So before we take a deep dive into Orlando Pride, make sure you leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. That helps us out so much here at A3. We're also on YouTube, so please subscribe to us at youtube.com/attacking third. Make sure you get exclusive NWSL content previews, recaps, and interviews right here on Attacking Third. The NWSL season begins March 25th. You can watch games on Paramount Plus, and we are doing a team preview for every single team, all 12 clubs. You can catch them on our podcast or on YouTube. Make sure you tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbors, tell your pets, tell everybody who you can tell about the 2023 NWSL regular season because it's coming up and we have to chat about all of the teams before March 25th gets here. And we're going to chat about Orlando Pride now. Let's start with a little bit of an overview for Orlando Pride and get everyone caught up with their off season. They're going to be led in 2023 by Seb Hines, officially promoted to head coach. This is going to be his first full season with the team. Was named interim head coach last season, June 7th, and then fully full time with the team this November. So going to have beginning, middle, and an end with this Orlando Pride side. They also made some other front office notable hires. Haley Carter as VP of soccer operations and general manager. Jel Barnes, who initially was an interim assistant last year, is going to return as a full time first assistant, and additionally, Paul Crichton going to be the team's goalkeeper coach. So a lot of additions with anytime you add a new head coach comes additional hires to sort of flesh out technical staff and stuff like that. So cool to see a lot of different parts here for Orlando Pride moving forward in 2023. And hopefully it'll help them improve on last year's standing because we left Orlando Pride in 2022 in a 10th place standing on the NWSL table with a 5-7-10 record. So 12 teams, 10th place. Safe to say that's the bottom half of the table. We were curious as to what their offseason was going to look like. Who are they going to hire? Right? That was one of the question marks. Who are they going to hire as head coach? Were they going to promote Seb Hines? They answered that question fairly quickly in their offseason. But how are they going to navigate something like the first ever free agency period for the league? How are they going to handle their draft as they entered the 2023 draft with a couple of really promising picks, and how were they going to navigate that event? So they did some interesting things, I think, coming out of the draft specifically. I wouldn't say that they were necessarily winners in the free agency period, but this was a team that definitely made some international signings. They went ahead and they targeted their draft to help sort of flesh out their roster looking ahead to 2023. And we gave their overall offseason a solid B. We liked the pieces, we liked the moves that they made and the pieces that they targeted to add on to this team. We wanted to maybe see a little bit more from this team out of free agency, but hey, it was the first year for everyone. You can't win them all. So we're giving a full B for Orlando Pride in the off season grade. But a big part of that was making sure that they re-signed Marta, because this was a player that was listed on free agency. Could have been one of many players who exercised the right to play in her options of the free agency period, but opted to re-sign with Orlando Pride, and Marta is going to make her return with the Pride this season. We've already got to see her play some minutes in She Believes Cup against the United States, Canada, and Japan. Immediately contributing to a goal with the Binya in one of the matches. So it's exciting. I think there's a lot of excitement there to see this type of legend make her return, not only to the pitch, but to Orlando Pride, because this is a player that has now been with this team for a number of years now. You can really say that this city has kind of become her home, and where she has sort of chosen to sort of close out these final stages of her career. But they also included another Brazilian player in signing Adriana as well, and they had a very successful draft.
Yeah, I think with this Orlando team and the offseason grade of a B, it can be a little bit objective because of how this goes, and that's why the fact that we landed on a B is pretty good for this Orlando side, considering the 2022 that they had. I think re-signing and getting head coach Seb Hines on board full time was massive. When Hines took over in June of last year, he turned the team around, and so much of what he talked about at the end of 2022 was that he wished he had more time with this team. He wished he had more time to mold them, to shape them, to have them buy into his coaching philosophy. He started to do two-a-days with that team in June when he took over, and he said that it really helped. That's what he wanted this team to know and understand. We actually had the pleasure of speaking with him about a month ago, and he talked about how he was really excited to sink his teeth in from preseason, the start of the year with this team. And I think that the initial signing of free agent Marta was massive for this team. Now, that's all that was on paper, but there was a lot of speculation before this during the free agency period where Orlando was trading some players around, getting lots of money. They were kind of gobbling up different money from trades and everything like that, that it was speculated that Orlando was going after a free agent in Debinha out of North Carolina, Brazilian midfielder, to play alongside someone like a Marta in the midfield to really turn this Orlando team around. Now, that did not happen. Orlando did not get Debinha. Debinha ended up going to Kansas City. And I think if you take that into account, that might be a bit of a failure for this Orlando side because they put so many eggs in that Debinha basket. However, they bounced back pretty quickly and kind of, I don't want to say shook it off by any means, but they didn't show their full cards to say, we wanted a Debinha, we did not get her, we're upset, because they did sign someone like an Adriana midfielder, another Brazilian midfielder to play alongside Marta. And you're right, Sandra, they had a draft class that was very impressive for a first-time NWSL coach to go through a draft process. They drafted the best defensive prospect in the NWSL draft this year, Emily Madrill. She was out of Florida State University and had an interesting path into the league. She ended up signing with a contract with the NWSL that allowed her to go on loan to play in Sweden last year. So she could then enter the 2023 draft. So this is a player that has experience not only winning national championships with Florida State University and anchoring a back line, but also already playing professionally. That's a leg up on anyone else in the draft class. I think Emily Madrill is going to be a massive boost for this Orlando Pride roster. And they also ended up getting another defender in Tori Hansen and a forward in Messiah Bright. I think Messiah Bright was very high on both of our draft prospect lists as someone that could go into a team. And she's strong, she's physical, she has a nose for goal and can score in a variety of ways. And really, that's what Orlando needs at this point, because the way that their roster is kind of built up, and we're going to get into it, they needed to bulk up on both ends of the pitch, defensively and in the attacking end. And I think with Marta Adriana, that'll definitely help them on the offensive side of things. And then you add in a Messiah Bright. And then across the back line, Emily Madrill is one that I expect to slot right in at the start of the season.
No, I'm with you. I think watching this team make the selections that they made in the draft sort of pivoted our off-season grade, because we weren't too sure where we were going to maybe rank them after coming out of that free agency period. But I liked the pieces that they rolled with coming out of the draft. That was when they targeted one of the positions that we said that they needed to specifically target, which was they needed some extra help and depth on that back line. And not only did they go out and get probably the highest rated defender in Madrill out of this draft, but Tori Hinson ended up slipping a little bit into, I believe, the second round. And they were able to draft her as well. So I think knowing now, as we're doing this preview ahead of the regular season, if we're looking at and comparing some of the additions that they made for their roster and comparing that to some of the losses, the players that are no longer going to be part of this team, we're talking about retirements, essentially players who have departed the club, whether it was Darian Jenkins announcing her retirement, Gunny Jan's daughter, Erin McLeod, uh, Tony Presley announced her retirement as well. So there's a couple defensive pieces there, um, along with trading someone like a Courtney Peterson to Houston and no longer having Carrie Lawrence as an option on the back line, who's out with indefinitely with a knee injury. So I think sort of looking and comparing the fact that you're going to have a couple defensive pieces that you lost in this offseason and sort of taking a look at the draft and the players in front of them, that maybe, just maybe, these are some players who are going to get some extended time with Orlando this season. But they're not the only ones. We still have to break down the roster by position, take a look at some other players who are going to be part of this regular season for Orlando Pride. And we're going to break that down after a quick break.
March Madness is almost here. Who's in? Who's out? The answers are revealed on the March Madness Selection Show, March 12th on CBS.
All right, let's chat a little bit about Orlando Pride's preseason roster by position. We're always excited to take a look at some of the names in preseason because there's always so many names to go through and take a look at. We saw 4 goalkeepers listed for this team: Kaylee Collins, McKinley Crone, Anna Morehouse, and Carly Nelson. Still trying to iron things out there in terms of who they're going to roll with going in net with 2023 starting right around the corner. 9 defenders: Carrie Bello, Caitlin Cosme, Tori Hansen, Cecilia. Carrie Lawrence was listed, Emily Madrill, Haley McCutcherson, Megan Montefusco, and Kylie Strom. Midfielders, maybe a little bit of an area that we need to pay attention to because for preseason, they listed a whopping 5 midfielders. Nicole Baxter was brought in as a non-roster invitee. Michaela Clough, Jordan Lishro, Thais Heiss, and Viviana Villacorta are also included amongst the 5 midfielders and 10 forwards. So maybe we're going to see some things shift around here for Orlando because that's a double-digit forwards. That's a lot to have competing for a place in the top line. Messiah Bright, someone who they selected out of the draft, Haley Bujaya, and then they've got Julie Doyle, Adriana Leal da Silva, Leah Pruitt, Kristen Scott, Erica Timrick. We've got Marta, and we've got Ellie Watt and Summer Yates, another one of those draft picks for Orlando Pride. When we're sort of taking a look at everything in front of us here, players that stand out as maybe, ones that we'll see in an ideal starting 11 for the Pride this season.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest question marks comes in the goalkeeper position for this team, losing someone like an Erin McLeod, who was a mainstay. Anna Morehouse got time last year with this Orlando team, so that could be somewhere where you slot in. But I think you have to look at the forwards because 10 forwards listed on this roster. Where are they going to slot in? How is that going to work out? I think someone I'm circling in this roster list is a player like Allie Watt. This is a forward that came to Orlando last year from OL Reign, and her first game, she ends up scoring a goal. So it was like, great, we're off on the right foot. We're on to a great start with Allie Watt. And then as the season goes on, it was almost like she got sucked into the Orlando vortex of struggle bus in terms of just not being able to be consistent enough. And that's something that Orlando really struggled with last year. I mean, they had a lot of changes, a lot of mishaps in the front office that causes them to lose not only their head coach, but an assistant coach as well. Having a lot of players be unhappy on the pitch, and that doesn't translate well. And we saw that a lot last year. And then you get a new interim coach coming in at the end of things, not necessarily shaking things up completely, but also trying to change things. You can get back on the winning ways and back to do the correct things at the end of the year to play spoiler if you're not going to push for the playoffs because you're not going to make it. But I think defensively there has to be a little bit of question marks coming in with this team because of the injuries and the trades that happened and who they lost, right? You lose someone like a Courtney Peterson, gets traded to Houston, Tony Presley retires, and now Carrie Lawrence is out. Those are 3 players that saw consistent time last year. And now that you've lost your goalkeeper as well, your starting goalkeeper from last year, how do you establish some consistency and leadership across that back line? Who's stepping up and who's going to take that role and really grab it by the scruff and say, this is my team, this is my defensive organization and structure. I don't know if an Emily Madrill can do that, but I think that she's going to be a really important part of this back line moving forward. I think those are probably some of the biggest questions that I have about this roster. What are we going to see in goal? And then who can play and contribute up top? And I'm looking at someone like an Allie Watt in that front line.
I think when we're looking at the roster in front of us, I think one of the things that Orlando has going for them as a franchise is, this is a club that it's felt like they've been in a rebuild year for the last 5 years. And I think when you are a player competing in that kind of environment, I think there's a real opportunity to say, actually, I can come in here, fight for a starting spot, and never give it back.
Yep.
So I'm looking at players, young players specifically, to try to get in there and sort of have that attitude and sort of, make things interesting in trainings. So it's no surprise that we're going to go with somebody like Emily Madrill as our young prospect for Orlando Pride to kind of, go into preseason, come out of preseason, head into regular season with Orlando and get ready to make an impact. I think that's one of the other things when we're talking about the off seasons and how teams targeted their draft selections. Yes, you have a lot of players that can come in with potential high ceilings and considered top rated talent, right? But very rarely do you get a wide number of players who are considered NWSL ready kind of talent. And I think that number narrows even more when you're talking to different clubs and their staffs about navigating the drafts. The idea of saying, hey, we want to target some of the top talent in the first round, that window narrows, that pool of player narrows even more when you specify it to who's going to be NWSL ready. You're talking maybe 1 to 2, possibly 3 players within the draft who are going to come in and be NWSL ready, right? Because we hear so often about how the transition from college to the professional league takes some time, and it's difficult for some players to come in and make that immediate impact off the roster. So we've seen in the past players like Atirna Davidson go number 1. We've seen Sophia Smith, right? We see what that means when we're looking at players who are going to come in here and make that kind of impact for their teams. And Emily Madrill was a lot of the narrative around her coming into and out of the draft was that she was the most NWSL ready defender out of the defenders amongst the draftees. So we're looking for Emily Madrill to sort of go in there, make an impact. It was great to chat with her on Attacking Third about some of her goals and how she wants to navigate her professional career moving forward. And I won't be surprised if there's a starting 11 that features an Emily Madrill. In that starting back line, which is what you want. I mean, we've seen Megan Montefusco kind of hold things down in one of those center back positions and other rotations around her. So it would be really great for this team to kind of solidify a center back duo, and maybe this could be the start for them.
I think that's a great point. Megan Montefusco with an Emily Madrill in the center back, like that sounds great to me. I want to see it. I want to see how that works out. But you're exactly right. It's a revolving door of that center back position next to Montefusco and kind of who can step in there and and be that player. I'm excited to watch Emily Madrill this year go off and be our young prospect. But on this roster, although there are a lot of younger names, maybe some newer names coming in, this is another rebuild year for an Orlando Pride team that has been on this rebuild, as you mentioned, for 5 years, 4 years. They're trying to kind of gain traction with that. And I think one thing that this Orlando Pride team can do to gain that traction in their rebuild and continue to get better is lean on their veterans. And one of their veterans that re-signed this year early in December with a 2-year contract under Seb Hines with Orlando is a player like Erica Timrak. This is a forward that definitely plays in the midfield for Orlando, and she can solidify a lot of things. She's a veteran in the league. She's been playing in this league since 2013, so she knows what is expected of her, what is expected of the league, what is expected of the team. And she's been with Orlando since 2021 after Utah Royals was no longer a team. This is a player in Timrak that I'm hoping can lead the way for this Orlando Pride team. I think if we see her in the midfield alongside someone like Viviana Villacorta that's coming back from injury that she suffered late in last year, that's a duo that I'm really excited to see. Throw in a Michaela Clough in there, Jordan Listro that we saw last year. Erica Timrak is the player that can be the most consistent on this roster, that can really tie together everything that was started at the end of 2022 under Seb Hines and take those steps and be that building player that continues to go with this team and make them one of the best. But she's got to put it all on her back, a player like Timrak.
I'm with you 100%. I think when we're looking at this roster, it would have been easy to take a look at someone like Martha and say, this is the player that this team, especially younger players, are going to draw off of and sort of feed off of their energy and look to as an example for someone who has been around as long as Martha has. But I'm absolutely with you, and I love that we narrowed it down to someone like an Erica Timrak, because, like you said, you talked a little bit about her career already. She's someone who has played in this league since 2013. But the fact that this player came out of retirement, essentially, to make a return to play in the NWSL, I think also speaks a lot to who Timrak is as a, not just a person, but as a player. So to kind of go from a former Kansas City franchise that went through some troubled times despite winning multiple championships, ended up folding, going to Utah Royals and tried to build something with the franchise out there. That team also going through a transition and ended up, coming out of that was Kansas City Current. And she retired in the beginning of 2020. At that point have already made like over 100 appearances in NWSL. So her making the return to NWSL, I thought was very unique and very special, because the Pride essentially acquired her rights as part of a bigger trade. So you're wondering, like, what is that going to mean? What are the conversations like with a player to convince them, right, to come out of retirement and come back and play for a franchise that we've been talking about, has sort of hit this reset button time and time again, right? So I think that this is a player that we're going to see this team rely upon a lot. I think they've done it. I think they've done that already a little bit. I mean, Timrick is a player who has put in shifts for this team in the midfield when people were looking at Orlando and saying, "Where is your midfield?
Yeah.
Where's Eric Timrick?" Right. So I'm curious to see the type of responsibility that Seb Hines is going to task her with moving forward. I'm also curious to see if this is a player that they're going to look to and hand off the captain's armband to. I mean, who's going to be the captain, right, moving forward for this Orlando Pride team after we saw that armband kind of get passed around between, I think it was Jan's daughter and I think it was McLeod as well. I think we've seen Martha wear it at times, but you want to have that go to someone who's going to be consistent and be part of those starting 11s week in and week out, someone that players can look to, as the pointer and the yeller and the director of things. So we're looking at Timrak as sort of someone who's going to fulfill that role for this team moving forward. And you know what? because it's a World Cup year, I think it makes sense that we go with someone like Timur, because somebody like Marta is probably going to be gone with Brazil for the upcoming World Cup. But it's not just Marta. They could also lose somebody like Adriana. We just saw this player alongside Marta in She Believes Cup as well. If fans out there aren't too familiar with her play, you can go back and maybe take a look at some of those 3 She Believes Cup matches. But a couple players here that they're going to be missing in light of a World Cup. All the more reason I think that we take a look at Timrak and say, hey, they might rely on this player. So to wrap things up here, let's maybe take a look at a couple things. We want to ask the biggest burning question for Orlando Pride, and we want to make a projected finish prediction. But when it comes to the biggest burning question for Orlando Pride, we went back and forth a little bit on this.
Yeah, this was a hard one.
Yeah, we do the content planning for these episodes, right? And we have these conversations and we're just like, geez, like what is it going to be for Orlando this year? Because you take a look at what they went through in 2022, ending out their season in 10th place. You take into consideration the off season that they had. And some of this, though, when we were contemplating this, is repetitious. It just sort of feels like Orlando has set themselves up for that rebuild year repeatedly for like almost, we said 5 years jokingly.
It's like Groundhog Day.
It's like Groundhog Day. So let's say maybe somewhere between like 4 to 3 years, maybe not 5 years. Like, you know, they did make the playoffs.
We're exaggerating. We were exaggerating a little bit.
We like to have fun here. We like to have fun. So they made the playoffs under Sermani in 2017, right? They eventually introduced Mark Skinner. They also did not have, they also had consecutive bottom table, second half of the table type of finishes. Then you have Mark Skinner depart back to England, coaching in WSL now. What's going to happen for this team moving forward? And within these windows of time, there are like these brief stretches of success for the Pride. We saw under Skinner, they went on like a 7-game undefeated to start their regular season, and then obviously his departure came, and then they just sort of fizzled out down the stretch. And then
that was 2021.
And then it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna enter our actual rebuilding era once more. It's not gonna be with Skinner, it's gonna be with Amanda Cromwell. And then that all happened. You can go back and check the episodes when we talked all about it. Look it up on A3. So then
it's fired halfway through the
season. And you've got Seb Hines now. So there's a lot of context here that we have in front of us when we're talking about biggest burning question. So we want to know from Orlando Pride, will this season actually be the first block in an official rebuild for this franchise?
It has to be that question, because they've been looking up the mountain at a rebuild for years. Can they start to build? Can they start to take those steps? And I think what we highlighted earlier in this conversation with our young prospect and defender, Emily Madrill out of FSU, and the veteran forward midfielder, Erica Timrak, it starts with those pieces. Can they be the ones to put down this first foundation layer with what Seb Hines is giving them as a team and as a roster, as a club, and start that rebuild? This team has to put on their horse blinders. They have to block out the noise, block out anything we say here on this show, block out what the haters say, block out what their fans say to some extent, put their head down and work this year and make sure that they are starting something new with this new generation and this new wave of Orlando Pride that they have with them. I think, we talked about it at the top of this conversation about Orlando Pride. They've also got Haley Carter in their front office. This is a player, or a former player, that is now into the administrative role in the NWSL. And I think that's also going to kind of turn the tide a little bit for this team and help them put down that first block for this official rebuild. And it starts at both ends, right? Whether you're a draftee coming in to make a name like Emily Madrill, or you're the general manager of a team in Haley Carter. And I think that the entire club is getting on the same page about what they want to be as a club, as a team, and what they want to do this year. Put their horse blinders on, and it starts day one, March 25th. Can this be the start of a new leaf for Orlando Pride?
We love to have jokes. We love to have fun here on A3. So maybe we transition this to the projected finish because we sort of feel like we're presenting that biggest question and we're bringing the hype and we're bringing the energy and we want to buy into this as
I
the
do. I
we
do
want
want
to
to buy
we want
into
to
it.
buy into the rebuild. A3 wants to buy into the rebuild, which breaks my heart that we have to talk about this projected finish because we still have Orlando Pride finishing within either the final bottom three or final three of the 2023 season. That's not to say that there's still not going to be things to buy into in terms of a rebuild for this team. I think we talked a lot about individual pieces and things to get excited about. And I think even within a rebuild year, even within a potential bottom half, possibly bottom table, like last of the table kind of finish, there are things to highlight and get excited about. I'm excited to see Seb Hines get a full season in front of him.
Totally.
This team, especially after chatting with him and talking about the biggest thing that he wanted out of 2022 was more time with that roster, that they wanted to target players and re-sign them from that 2022 roster and make sure that they were back in 2023 to work with them. So there are things I think to get excited about. They're going to see the return of Marta and extended minutes. They're going to see the return of Viviana Villacorta. This is one of those draft pieces that they selected to try to build a young core in this team, and they should still be excited about this player.
And she was on such a high before she got that injury. She was getting so many consistent minutes. She was a crucial part of this Orlando midfield. And oh God, heartbreaking. I remember that game where she went down with that ankle injury and she just looked devastated on the sidelines. Oh God, that was so sad to see. So that's a player I agree. I want to get back on this roster. Imagine Villacorta in the midfield with a Marta. Like, yes, Orlando has all the pieces. They've got to put it together. But I agree. I don't know. I think that this could still be a bottom table team, but that doesn't mean they haven't taken their first step in the rebuild. It doesn't mean that they didn't put down the foundation about what this team and this club could be in the next several years if they finish at the bottom of the table still.
We're going to get to see sophomore seasons for Michaela Clough. And we're also going to, not only for Seb Hines to get a full season, but we're going to get to see, hopefully, a full season of Allie Watt with this team.
Yes.
Well. So let's see. Let's present the question of whether or not
there's a lot to be excited and hopeful about with this team.
We're going to keep it. We're going to present that question. We're going to make sure and see and ask of Orlando if this is going to be the season where we see this first official block in a rebuild and try to compare that with how they finish in the regular season. Stay tuned. We'll have to see. We want to see Orlando Pride finally take that first step officially. But that's going to be a wrap for the Pride on this one, on Attacking Third. Thank you all so much for joining along and listening to our previews. Make sure you download, follow, and listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts. You can watch us too, so please subscribe to us on YouTube so that you get alerts whenever we do go live at youtube.com/attacking third. We'll be back with more team by team previews for the 2023 season. It kicks off on March 25th on Paramount Plus. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.